I'm Caroline Spelman. I'm the Member of Parliament for Meriden, which is in the very middle of England. And in our Parliament, I have the role of Second Church Estates Commissioner. And what is that? It means I am the go-between between the Church of England and our Parliament, because the Church of England is the established church in this country. If it wants to change its rules, these have to go through both Houses of Parliament. So there are plenty of bishops in the Lords who can do that, but I have to take legislation through the House of Commons, and that is what I do.
Oh, I didn't realise that's fantastic. Okay, let's go for the questions. As a multi-faith and growing secular country, does the Christian faith in the UK have any political influence?
Well, I certainly would agree with the description of our country being multi-faith, and that is a function of our history, of course, because we had an empire and many of those countries were not of Christian faith historically, and as people have come to live here, they've brought their faith and their traditions with them. I think I would probably dispute your point about secular, because it is quite interesting that 51% of people in the 2011 census said that they were of Christian origin, so that would make us a majority Christian country. And the percentages are also given in the census for the other faiths. People who say they're of no religion tend to have plateaued a bit. There was a high point in 2009 where 31% of the population said they had no religion. But actually, it's come down a bit since then, and we shouldn't overlook the fact that that was tested in 2009, just after the felling of the Twin Towers. Mm. That probably had an influence on the way people thought about themselves and their beliefs.
That's fascinating. I must admit, I use the term Christian as those people who have a working faith and attend church and have made, in effect, Jesus Christ their Lord.
Yeah, but when people answer on a census, you know, what is your religion, and 51% of them say that they're Church of England, you know, whether or not they attend, and we don't know, we don't get to look into 51% of the population's hearts to find out whether they accept Jesus Christ as their Saviour. We don't know that. So we can only go really on what they tell us.
Very true. As each new generation is less involved with the Christian church, and obviously you may wish to dispute that, how will this impact upon the moral attitudes and life purposes of the British nation?
Well, the intergenerational pattern is interesting. So 30% of the churchgoers in the Church of England are over 70. About 20% are under 18, and the rest fall in the 18 to 69 age group. I think it was true that during the 1970s, 80s, maybe in the 1990s, there wasn't enough encouragement for young people to come to church or continue attending church after they were children. And we see a bit of a gap in that middle-age group. But the interesting thing is that numbers are picking up amongst young people again. So there's been a rise in younger people's attendance. I think there are probably a variety of reasons for that. I think the church has understood that it needs to make a better offer to the younger generation, that they were turned off by what was being provided. And the church now has a conscious policy of opening new churches in areas where, for example, young families live. You know, in the past, we tended to build new housing estates for young families, but not had a church anywhere near them. Mm. And so the church is in a process of opening churches where younger people are. It's just provided a new church facility in the heart of Birmingham, in the old gasworks, which is designed to appeal to the student population of Birmingham.
That's what the church is doing, but the government is seemingly taking religion out of the schools, particularly Christianity, and making it equal, so therefore not giving it any real relevance to young people.
Well, again, I would dispute that assumption as well. The Church of England is the largest provider of education in the United Kingdom. So nearly everybody knows of a church school in their locality, and they're very sought after. So the government has just actually given a commitment to allow more faith schools to be open, because it knows that parents like them, because they like the values that are taught in them. So the Church of England certainly intends to take advantage of that and look perhaps to open more secondary schools. It's very dominant in primary education, but actually the Catholic Church has a larger number of secondary schools. So I think this is very positive. This is the government embracing the fact that faith schools are good schools, and 80% of the Church of England schools are measurably good or outstanding schools, and actually encouraging the Church with state funding to open more of them.
You're painting a picture which is quite good, but it does seem as if over the years the church congregations have fallen and fallen and fallen. Do you feel that the way in which you've described will actually help for it not to fall?
Well, I think church attendance patterns vary. So you're right that church attendance amongst traditional Anglican congregations has been in decline, roughly 1% per annum. But other less traditional Christian traditions, like black majority churches, are growing fast, particularly in our urban areas. So we need to look at those things in the round. We need to understand what makes those churches very attractive to their churchgoers, and the church needs to adapt and change. You know, the fact is that a lot of young people want a form of worship in their idiom, what they're used to. And the new church, for example, in Birmingham, I remember walking up to it from the outside. I could hear the loudspeakers and the music from halfway down the street and thought, I don't know whether I'm going to enjoy this. But actually, when I got in there, it was wonderful. You know, it was very young, very vibrant, very noisy. But, you know, that is what a lot of younger people are looking for in terms of a style of worship that more accurately reflects what they and their generation enjoy doing.
We have a number of those churches locally in Coventry, in Bedworth, etc., but they're not run by the Church of England. They're run by almost independent churches.
Well, the Church of England is maybe cottoning on to what works, and a good thing too. I mean, it made £1 million available to adapt the old gasworks in Birmingham, and when you walk into it, you wouldn't initially even perhaps realise you're in a church, because it's a big urban industrial building, a large space, if you like, but it has all the modern equipment of today's IT world, indeed, with very large loudspeakers and flat screens, the kind of things that young people regard as quite a normal part of the digital media that's a daily part of their lives. So I think you've got to change or die, really, haven't you?
Yes.
And there's a real commitment under the last Archbishop and the present one to really tackle this. And I think we're seeing evidence of the way in which it's working. And the other end of the spectrum, where it's quite challenging for the church, is rural churches with very small populations. Well, there the church has again taken a different approach, which is to say a lot of these rural communities have lost their post offices and pubs and other services, but the church building, going back to the Middle Ages, is still there, maybe poorly attended, but it's still standing and the roof doesn't leak. So we're adapting those buildings to provide more of a community facility. So these days you will find post offices, even doctors' surgeries, business centres run out of the parish church. And the church has just had a bit of a breakthrough in offering the government to put Wi-Fi booster boxes and mobile phone booster signal boxes on the tops of its towers and spires, so that people living in the countryside who are disadvantaged by not having a mobile phone signal or not being able to get on the internet will have those services. And I think in a way that is about serving your community, and it's one of the integral steps to being a good witness in your community, is to meet the needs of others. And you have to hope by doing that people will be drawn to the gospel, which is the principal reason why the church was built in the first place.
Thank you. Why is it that Christianity is in decline? You may again disagree with this. And should our government encourage schools to more effectively promote the spirituality in our society? Well,
again, it depends where you're talking about. So Christianity is growing fast in other parts of the world, in countries like China, for example, and by far and away the largest number of Anglicans are in sub-Saharan Africa. You know, I have to challenge people's expectations here. The reality is, you know, a typical Anglican member is female, under the age of 35, living in sub-Saharan Africa. It's very interesting. But here and in developed countries, there is more indication of decline amongst traditional forms of worship. But then I think, particularly in the United Kingdom, the strength that the Church of England has in its schools is the absolute key to the future. So the Church of England educates over 1 million pupils every year. So that is 1 million young people who do not have to be Christians to go to Church of England schools. It's absolutely open to all. But when they come into Church of England schools, they are taught religious literacy about other faiths, but also about the Christian faith, and the ethos of that school is clearly Christian. So if you go to places like Bradford, which are predominantly Muslim in demography, you will find the Church of England schools have 80–90% Muslim children within them, but they are still Church of England schools. And in fact, our own Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government, Sajid Javid, told a public audience here in Parliament that his parents had sent him to a Church of England school because they've appreciated the values in church schools. And I think this is one of the most important ways that Christianity is spread.
Interesting, but the Church of England schools tend to be the primary schools, not the secondary schools.
Not this, we do have secondary schools, but not as many as the Catholic Church does. There's a lot of secondary schools. But the Church of England now is committed to opening more secondary schools. I think that would be a good thing. It's very clear the primary schools are very popular with parents, but we need to think about the provision for children from the years of 11 to 18.
Certainly, when I was at school, we were taught that there was a God, and it seems as if a lot of the teachers now are just teaching the religion in a way which is historic, as opposed to have some degree of faith involved. And that's really the point of the question, the very fact that the children don't see a spirituality within the religion that they could actually come to know.
Well, you've come to Parliament to have a debate, so I will debate that. It's very interesting that religious education has risen in popularity as an A-level. And one of the reasons it is so popular is that young people love to debate the challenging issues, the ethics that we battle with in this world. And they're fascinated by spirituality. And both of those things, an inquiring mind and a fascination with why people believe and how that influences the decisions that they make for right and for wrong and knowing the difference. The fact that that is so popular, I think, is a great encouragement. I think religious literacy is really important going forward in order to make sense of some of the conflicts that we have in the wider world. I mean, I would certainly contend that quite often those conflicts at root represent the hijacking of religion for political ends. We know all about that in the United Kingdom. That's what happened in Northern Ireland. But actually it's really important for the next generation of young people that they are literate in terms of religion, because that's the only way they're going to make sense of the future. And I detect there's less hostility now to teaching that than there was before. I would say about 5 years ago there was a bit of squeamishness. You know, people always used the word multi-faith. They didn't like to be seen to prefer one faith over the other. I think we're actually getting over that, and I think public figures are not afraid to talk about the persecution of Christians in the Middle East and the fact that we should do something about that because it's a genocide. And we don't have to be completely even-handed when we speak in that way. We have to point out the truth. And that we're not squeamish about talking about God and teaching about religion. I think attitudes are changing because of the nature of the conflicts and challenges that the world faces.